Okay, so it looks like we're ready to go. We're live streaming on our portal.
Okay. I will start our meeting off then. Welcome. We are starting now for the Committee of the Whole special budget meeting for March 29th, starting at 6 o'clock. And we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. And if I could get everyone to unmute, and we'll do a quick roll call of who is present. Okay, starting with Councillor Parkinson.
I'm present.
Councillor Kobayashi.
I'm present.
Councillor Logan.
Present.
Councillor Baxter.
Present.
Councillor Jansen.
Present.
Mayor Martin.
Present.
Excellent. We have a full complement. So I am looking for approval of the agenda of the Special Committee of the Whole. It is moved by Councillor Baxter. Is anyone opposed to the agenda or have an amendment? Nope, sorry, I've forgotten how to do my lowering all hands. There we go. Any amendments that are required? Seeing none, the agenda is approved, and we begin with public participation. I believe that we have at least a couple of people who have registered to speak tonight. Staff?
Yes, so we've received 4 written submissions today, and they were appended to the agenda and circulated to council. We have 3 members of the public registered to speak tonight. Would you like me to introduce them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we will first introduce Laura Davis. Laura, could you please press *6 to unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hello.
Good.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Laura Davis, 3324 Pippet Place in Colwood. Mayor and Council, I currently am the president of a newly formed Arts and Culture Colwood Society, and also past president of the West Shore Arts Council. It's really wonderful to be having all this discussion around funding for local arts programming in Colwood. I find that accurate and up-to-date information really helps everyone make healthy decisions and good decisions. So I just wanted to talk about the staff report a bit, just to reiterate that the West Shore Arts Council is not an all-volunteer organization. It does retain a chief operating manager. And the West Shore Arts Council does not provide arts programming in View Royal and Metchosin at this time. And in their recent presentation to you folks, there is not any planned programming that I'm aware of for Colwood. The organization, as they have indicated in the recap of their website, says they're a lead advocate for arts on the West Shore, and they are not, and nor do they act as a conduit for information exchange between other arts groups. I just wanted that clarification. Also, the Coast Collective is still a viable not-for-profit and is conducting some arts programming in Colwood and the nearby communities. Of note is that the Coast Collective was turned down in the past for the Youth and Children's Art Show funding for the years 2019 and 20 by the West Shore Arts Council. This created a lot of vulnerability for their organization when COVID arrived. When discussing arts programming and providing comparative information, also presented by staff, it was indicated that the Wanda Fuqua Performing Arts Center was also a contribution. These types of contributions really aren't for arts programming that's happening now, which I believe you're going to be talking about tonight with the CRD Arts program. And I understand that there was some information circulated from that group about Have Your Say to artists and arts organizations in the Colwood area. And I really would see this organization as not being involved in that aspect of programming because they're just not working with the layers of funding and the knowledge for operating an arts organization. So I believe this discussion today you're going to have is about the here and now arts engagement for Colwood citizens. So I've recommended actually to you in the years past that the City of Colwood give a flat donation as a way of contributing to the CRD arts program, with the thought that it would help a relationship going forward without a locked-in agreement, which Service Agreement 1 and 2 would be. I note that North Saanich did this in 2018, and I believe an important factor here is to look at the value in the donation, the return on investment. Once that's been established, if you were to take this method, which I'm not sure is acceptable at this point, they may not offer it. But once that's established, you certainly would be in a position to look at what the benefits are from that funding going forward. So I support the work that the CRD is doing to bolster our arts sector in Greater Victoria, and I support being a part of the CRD art programming going forward. However, I'm just looking at the unique mix of Colwood and the startup of our own local arts and cultural organization. And with the current tax rate increase on an already high tax base for this year, I really find it would be prudent to discuss the CRD arts contribution earlier in the budget process next year. It's really the timing that worries me here. I feel like Colwood needs to just figure out what they're doing with respect to art engagement for their citizens. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, Laura. Next.
Okay, so the next person that we have is Kim Jordison. Kim, can you press *6 to unmute yourself, please?
Hello?
Hello. Welcome. You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Tonight, I'd like to acknowledge the challenges residents and businesses have been faced with in our community during these uncertain times. And I think it's fair to say that we've known for quite some time that COVID-19 was not only going to affect our communities for just 1 year, and that seems to be a reality. We are all living in the times of COVID-19 now in its second year. Many families and businesses are still facing hardships, and job and income loss has been severe. I believe the cost of living adjustment for 2021 is under 1%, but I'm not certain. To date, only a small fraction of people have received COVID vaccinations. And while I realize there was a 0% increase in municipal property tax in 2020, residents and businesses are still experiencing serious financial stress. The City of Colwood's level of residential and commercial taxation is already among the highest within the CRD. I feel that this is not the time for a huge increase in spending and taxation for our city. The proposed 7% increase in property taxes seems unacceptable. We all need time to financially recover from the impacts of this global pandemic. On January 22nd, 2021, I sent an email to the city asking a question, which was forwarded to the CFO of the city to answer. The question was, can you please tell me approximately what the tax base for Colwood is forecasted to be once the Colwood Corners area and the Royal Bay area have been fully developed? On February 8th, after not receiving a response, I followed up again. The response I got was, no, we do not have this information readily available. This response greatly concerns me. The city has to have an idea of the tax money that will come in from any planned development, as that's a key piece of information when approving such developments. It's also required for budgeting purposes. It's called forecasting, and it's not a new concept. To date, I've yet to receive a response, and I feel this is unacceptable. And if this was found to be a difficult question, this leaves me with very little confidence in the city's budgeting capabilities. It concerns me that we will be a city of high-density development and high taxes. In summary, I'd like to urge Council to demonstrate leadership and management and show concern and respect for Colwood taxpayers and voters by not supporting the proposed budget as presented to the Committee of the Whole. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And I believe we have one more resident.
Yes, we have John English. John, could you please press star 6 to unmute yourself?
There. Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Excellent. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for providing this opportunity this evening to speak with you. The Royal Bay Homeowners Association members are strongly opposed to the size of increases in spending and taxation being contemplated by the city at this time. We've previously forwarded our assessments of the financial plan that has been prepared by city staff for Council to consider as adopting for the city's budget for 2021. We provided that information on March 22nd to the mayor and every council member. We provided it again on March 28th. We urge you all to read and give careful consideration to the observations and recommendations in those documents. Those documents were prepared with a great deal of considerable thought and debate amongst members in our community. We're blessed to have a considerable number of people in our community who actually have considerable experience and expertise in developing and managing large budgets, both in public and private sector organizations. So we really believe that that information that we have forwarded to you on 2 occasions is very well thought through and based on a lot of experience. We would urge you to consider it. I will not repeat all the information that we've previously forwarded to you this evening. We would, however, be happy to address any questions any of you may wish to send to us. This evening, what our membership wants me to do is to ensure that you are fully appreciate the financial environment within which you're considering the financial plan for the city for 2021. Within our community, there's a nice young family with a mom and a dad and a 3-year-old little girl. The father has just learned that he will be laid off because the company he works for just lost a major contract. He is spending his time and money to retrain in another industry. The mother continues to have a job, but there's no doubt they're financially hurting. Within our community, there's also a hardworking individual who had built up his own company over many years. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, he lost 90% of his customer base. This individual had to let go all of his employees. He closed his office down, and he is now working hard to rebuild his business from home. There's another family where the husband was a pilot for a major airline. He was laid off in March of 2020, and he has not worked in months. Finally, there's a nice young family with 2 income earners and one of them who had been working as a flight attendant for another major airline. That person has also not been able to work for months. These are only 4 of many situations that we're aware of in our community where people have been financially hurt by the COVID-19 pandemic. We could describe many more similar situations to you. Hopefully, what we've described this evening will help you appreciate that the current financial environment for which you're considering a 2021 budget is not conducive to large increases in spending and taxation. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, John. I believe that is the last of our registered speakers. There were also 4 written submissions, and that will conclude our public participation for now, for tonight's meeting. I just will move us along to our presentations next. We have Director Jeremy Loveday, the Chair of the CRD Arts and Culture Commission, and James Lamb, the Manager for the CRD Arts and Culture Support Service.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Loveday, Chair of the CRD Arts Commission. With me today is James Lamb, who's the Manager of the arts programming at the CRD. I want to just first thank you very much for the invitation to come back and present again and share some information, as well as answer some of the questions. Both James Lamb and I did watch your previous committee meeting where this was discussed, so that can answer some of those questions up front, and then happy to answer any more questions that come up while we're here. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And is that coming through clear for you now?
Yes.
Perfect. So go here. So a little bit about the structure of the CRD Arts Support Service. It was established by bylaw 2884, and the aim is to provide support to the arts sector for both social and economic benefits that the arts creates for the region. And it is a sub-regional partnership that provides support to regional arts organizations in addition to local support. So any participating jurisdiction, the arts organizations in their area are eligible to apply for grants. And in non-participating jurisdictions, their organizations that have an address there are not able to apply, or organizations that may have a home in say a neighboring municipality but want to put on an event in Colwood, they would not be able to apply for funding for that as well. There was discussion at your last committee meeting about the relationship between this service and the discussion about the CRD Arts facilities. And that is an ongoing discussion, and I recognize that could be a point of confusion as they're parallel discussions, but they are separate. And if Colwood were to join the CRD Arts Commission, that in no way ties you to that broader discussion of facilities support. That would be a totally different discussion. So I just wanted to clarify that. The way that it's structured is I am the chair of the Arts Commission. I am come to the commission as I am the appointee from the City of Victoria, and every participating jurisdiction has one member who is appointed to the commission. And we all have one vote. So Saanich, although they're the biggest municipality and they pay the most in, they get the same amount of votes as Highlands, for example. So it's one member, one vote. And our role as the Arts Commission is to provide oversight and governance and to approve budgets and policies. So although we approve every grant, we do not adjudicate the grants. The grants are adjudicated by the Arts Advisory Council, which is formed through bylaw 2973. And there are a group of appointed volunteers, that's 12 members, and they do what is hard work of looking at all the amazing grant proposals and adjudicating which ones deserve how much money based on their impact. And so the fact that we have the commission provides the oversight and the Arts Council is all volunteer, that does allow us to have a very lean operating model of 2.8 staff people, and who keep the ship moving right and do the deep dives on policy. We have 5 funding programs. I will very briefly go over them. just tell you what they're for, and if Colwood were to join, what your arts organizations could apply to. So there's an operating grant, a project, series and extended programming grant, incubator, equity, and idea grants. And so the first one is operating. This is the big one. So this provides ongoing support for programming and operations. So many of the established arts organizations within the region do receive operating grants. And one thing we've done is we've moved to allow for multi-year funding, which really provides the predictability that arts organizations need, and it really allows them to thrive. Secondary, we have project grants. This supports one-time projects. It could be a festival or an arts opening or a music in the park type event. It could be a one-time or a series. And often these are smaller or community-based organizations that receive these, but not necessarily. And then we have equity grants, which is a fairly new grant program, which specifically provides access to equity-seeking groups which would normally face or could be at risk of facing systemic barriers to funding. And the idea here is to make sure that everyone gets to have the benefits of the arts in our region. We also have incubator grants, which are for arts organizations to build their internal capacity. And this could be an organization that recognizes some internal growth that they need to continue to put on amazing art or to take the next step as an organization. And we provide grants to those organizations for that purpose. And finally, there's idea grants. And this could be of interest to Colwood as well, as non-arts organizations apply to idea grants to put on arts programming. And this really opens up the possibilities for other nonprofits to partner to put on arts and cultural events. And it has been a great success. Finally, we're looking at the granting process. So applicants respond to published grant deadlines. For example, last week we just approved the project grants. There's 2 intakes a year on that one. And the process goes like this. It's published grant deadlines, then staff review applications for eligibility and completeness. That then goes to the advisory council, and they do the jurying process of really digging in and evaluating. And then from there, they make recommendations to the Arts Commission of who and how much funding each organization should receive. And then we do the final stamp of approval, but then results are monitored through final reporting. And all of the outcomes of that are reported annually in the Arts and Culture Support Service Progress Report, which I believe you received at the last meeting. Why should Colwood participate? One major reason is that currently organizations, arts organizations or non-arts organizations in the idea grant category are not eligible for funding. And if you were to join, there would be a whole group of new Colwood organizations that would have this pool of money that is funded from the majority of the region that they would have access to. And secondarily, funding organizations would be funded for presenting and producing in Colwood. So even if the organization had an address somewhere else, they would be able to host events in Colwood. And finally, it's the idea of regional contribution. And you all know better than I do that Colwood has many arts lovers, many arts and cultural volunteers, and many people who work in the arts. And we are stronger together in terms of support for arts and culture, and to continue to see both the social benefits and the very substantial economic benefits that arts and culture bring. I think it behooves us to have participation from across the region. So we really do hope that Colwood will join and support the efforts of all of your residents and who are volunteering and working and supporting the arts already. So that's the presentation, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a quick question for you before we jump ahead. One of our speakers tonight asks about whether or not there is still a provision to join at a flat rate.
Maybe I'll hand that one off to James.
Sure, happy to speak to that through the chair. Thanks for the question. I think the speaker was referring to the possibility of a jurisdiction making a donation.
Yes.
That is true. North Saanich, in fact, has made an annual donation rather than participate in the service as a participating member. That is a great acknowledgement on the part of North Saanich that they want to provide some kind of contribution to the activities of the service. As Jeremy had earlier outlined, that would not constitute participation within the bylaw. And so that would not allow your participating or your resident organizations to be eligible to participate in the grant funding programs.
Thank you. And next I have Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Day. Through the chair, just a quick question. I have a few questions actually. My first question is, what is the makeup of the Arts Advisory Council? Is there one member, at least one member from each municipality, or how does that work?
We don't have a quota per municipality, unlike the commission, which has one representative participating municipality. They're a volunteer commission, and so they are brought together. They're solicited through public advertising. There is a set of guidelines of skills and requirements for a contributing member, and interested individuals participate, or they apply based on their interest, based on those guidelines. And then there's a matrix that they're scored on, just like any other kind of application. Within the bylaw for the Arts Advisory Council, there's a process for selection, and ultimately they're appointed by the Arts Commission themselves.
Okay, thank you. And the 5 grants, you said the majority of it's in the operational ops grants. Do you have a breakdown just quickly? Do you have rough numbers and how that money is broken down by grant?
The operating grant program, there's about 2.7.
I just need percentages if you have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the operating grant is about $2.4 million total. And so I would say that's probably, 90% of the funding.
Oh.
And project grants is about $240,000. Equity grants, incubator grants, and ID grants are smaller programs.
Okay. And my next question is, I'm just trying to understand who the applicants are. You say organization, so we have to have an organization here in Colwood that applies for this, or are they individuals? Who are the applicants? I'm just trying to understand that.
Sure. Applicants are not-for-profit organizations. So it's not a organization in a given jurisdiction. The Local Government Act requires us to fund only not-for-profits for accountability purposes. We can't fund individuals. And so any not-for-profit arts organization, for example, that's based in Colwood, could conceivably apply to one of the programs, depending on the guidelines, of course. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So I don't even think we have one. Well, aside from the West Shore Arts Council, do you know, Councillor Day, if we have an arts organization anymore here in Colwood, per se?
Yes, there's a couple.
Okay.
So certainly there's a couple of nonprofit. Laura Davis has started the Colwood Arts Group, which is registered as a nonprofit. Coast Collective is also a nonprofit.
Okay, they're the two that I can think of, but okay, thank you.
Through the chair, if I may add one more comment. The IDEA grant program that Director Loveday mentioned also is a program that's specifically designed for non-arts mandated organizations to also apply to that particular program. That program is designed mainly for non-arts organizations, which is a requirement for all the other programs, to use the arts in the pursuit of their own mandate through the use of, say, hiring artists or creating arts programming within whatever their mandate is.
Okay, thank you.
If I could jump in as well, thanks, through the chair. So it could also be cultural organizations. So if Colwood has, for example, choirs or dance groups, or if you look at the whole list of funded organizations, it's not necessarily groups that would call themselves arts organizations, but they're putting on arts and cultural activities.
Okay. And my last, it's not even a question, it's just a comment. I would highly recommend, because I find it a little offensive, I guess, because I've been involved with lots of events where we raise money for arts and culture, and for all Greater Victoria, and I don't consider myself a free rider. So I would take that out if I were you. That's it. I just find that a bit offensive, because just my own experiences. That's all I have. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I thank you for your presentations. And if you could stop sharing your screen, that would be good. Excellent. Thank you so much. So, members of council, there is also a backgrounder briefing included in our package. I did speak to staff earlier today, and it is provided for our benefit, but we're not going to have a staff person walk us through that. If you have any questions for staff, now would be the time. And then I'm hoping that if you're happy with all of the information that has been provided, it would be good if we could get a motion indicating whether we wish to take any action at this time. Okay. Councillor Parkinson.
I think the appropriate move is to move receipt.
Okay. I don't think Mr. Mina would be very happy with that motion, but I think we're looking for a motion to indicate for our staff where we wish to go with this, whether we want to consider joining the Arts and Culture Support Service, or if we wish to carry on as we have been.
And with your permission, Chair, then I'll withdraw that motion and let somebody make a motion one way or the other to your liking.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Day. I guess where my head is that, I mean, I really, really want to support this, but this feels like a last minute request, and we're sitting here with a bit of a budget problem right now, and so are we just going to add to it right now? I think that I'd be more than willing to support this at a later time, but at this particular time, my appetite isn't that big, because we are facing a major tax uplift right now, and I know this will affect our CRD mill rate if we were to take on either level. So that's how I feel right now. It's if the timing of this is, obviously it should have been part of the discussion earlier. So, we can prioritize it accordingly. I sincerely am supportive of it, but it's just bad timing right now. And, and my recommendation is that we defer this and put this, absolutely into the budget cycle early in the fall. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm getting comments. I don't have a motion yet. So it is difficult. It's a difficult time all around. It's certainly a difficult time for the arts. Everybody who's in the arts or knows someone who's in the arts, it is definitely hard for them. However, I do not personally feel prepared to join in this program at this time because I'm not really aware of a great, I need to be really convinced to put my money into something at this point in time. I'm very supportive of the arts, and I think Colwood is too, which is clear from the backgrounder. There's a considerable amount of money geared towards the arts over the next 3 years. There's about, I think if you added them all up, you'd be looking at 100 and what is that, 30,000? Something like that. I didn't add them all up in my head. So I'm going to put forward a very short and simple motion that we choose not to support the CRD Arts and Culture Support Service this year. Oh, I have a hand. Councillor Jansen.
I guess it's committee, so you don't need a seconder. I was going to make a similar motion. Go ahead.
No problem. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Not seeing any, I will call the question. Those opposed? Councillor Baxter is opposed.
Sorry, so am I. I couldn't find my hand.
Oh, okay. So Mayor Martin and Councillor Baxter are both opposed to not joining the CRD Arts and Culture Service today. Oh, I see another hand. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Baxter?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Our next, oh goodness, my agenda items are all over the place. Our next item is our unfinished business, item 5.1. And I will put this to Jen.
Thank you, Chair Day. So when we last spoke, we had one agenda item that we did not get to, and we deferred to tonight's meeting. And that is the 2021 Budget Service Recommendations Memo. The purpose of this memo is to highlight the approximate, we have 11 recommendations that staff are seeking direction on. 10 of those 11 relate to proposed service increases, and the first recommendation relates to the Pacific Center Family Services Community Outreach and Prevention Program. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to go through each of those recommendations, and ultimately staff are seeking direction. Next steps would see staff return to council with the draft financial plan bylaw for consideration. So right now our schedule sees us return to council with that draft bylaw on Monday, April 12th for introduction and first 3 readings. We would then be looking at adoption on April 26th. Should committee direct staff to return with any additional information, we will have to consider the implication of that on bringing the draft bylaw forth with the timeline I just mentioned. And so I do not have a PowerPoint slide for tonight's meeting. Rather, corporate services will bring up the text of each recommendation as it's being drafted, in the memo before you. And then depending on what committee recommends, we will update that before you.
And just to clarify, Jen, the financial impact of each of these recommendations is already included in the budget, correct?
Correct. And so thank you, Chair Day, for that question. So the first item, the additional $40,000 for purposes of the Community Outreach and Prevention Program, that is included within the 2.99% tax increase. All other items are what make up in the sum the 3.01% tax increase that's in addition. And so with that, I'll perhaps look to corporate services to just share their screen and bring up the first recommendation.
Sorry for a second to interrupt here. Jen, you talked about a 2.99% tax increase and a 3.01% tax increase. There's another 1% floating around somewhere, isn't there?
There absolutely is, and that's the additional 1% to set aside for purposes of sustainable infrastructure directly into our reserves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair Day. Just another really quick question, Jen. I just wanted to just clarify this in my own head. This has nothing to do with tonight, but just the special initiatives, is that a part of the core or is that the added services? The thing that we call special initiatives?
Thank you for that question through the chair. So special initiatives typically represent one-time expenditures, and those are independent of the property tax increase.
Okay.
The city does set aside a little funding each year for purposes of funding those, but each of those special initiatives has no direct bearing on the proposed property tax increase. We fund special initiatives primarily out of our reserves or surplus.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was confirmed in my own head. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, so our first item is on the Community Outreach Prevention Education Services. There we go. Councillor Baxter.
We had a few speakers speak about the difficult times we're in. And I think in times of difficulty, this is the kind of thing we need. This is to help people who are having difficulties. So I would move that this be included in the budget.
Thank you. And Councillor Parkinson.
Pretty much word for word what Michael just said. I just don't think we can spend enough on this kind of stuff at this point in time. I think this is going to head off some issues, maybe not enough, but it's going to head off some issues in the future and will make our city a better place. So I support this motion.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm just going to jump in there and remind you that this line item specifically is for children and youth. I guess they kind of stretch their limitations a little bit, which is one of the marvelous things about the Community Outreach Prevention Education Program, is that they have two really wonderful things. One is that they are not locked into a single model of support, and the other is that they maintain long-term relationships with the youth who use the program. So excellent. I will call the question, not seeing any other hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Okay. I'm not sure who's working the corporate services magic back there, but if you'd like to move on to the human resources, perfect. I have some hands. Excellent. Councillor Parkinson.
I'm going to suggest that we move this to the bottom of the list. We're looking at potentially hiring a number of people. I think the number is 14. If we hire a whole bunch of new people, we certainly probably need this. If we decide through our deliberations tonight not to hire any of those new people, then we may not need it. So to me, it's related to are we hiring as many people as is currently proposed or not? So if I could, I'd like to move deferring this to the end of the list.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Councillor Kobayashi, are you speaking to this motion or something else?
Something else.
Okay, I will keep you in mind, and I'm just going to lower all hands right now. Looking, I didn't see anyone else's hand up, so I don't want to waste anyone's time. We are looking to move this to the end of our agenda rather than the second thing on our agenda. Would that work? So after storm sewer for this one? Any opposed to that, moving that to the end of the items we're considering here? I don't see anyone opposed, so that is recommendation number 2 will be considered after recommendation number 11. All right, Councillor Kobayashi, coming back to you.
Thank you very much, Chair Day. And please, fellow councillors, I don't mean to do this as grandstanding at all. But I'm just going to give you a perspective. I went through this entire list, and I know we're going through line by line right now. And the only one that I strongly believed was valid was the one that we just passed, which was for the Pacific Family Center. The rest, I believe, and I will be voting accordingly. So I'll keep my mouth shut for each line item hereafter. But firstly, I believe that what we've done, the core services and the increases that we have to do to our core services is a must. We've already got approved developments, and we also know about the work that is coming. So I know that we have to staff up in order to get these things done. So I had no problems with the increases in the core budget itself. Secondly, as alluded to by the people in the public, and I do understand this even more so right now, we are still suffering the economic downturn of the COVID-19 pandemic. And although some businesses have thrived and are successful, there's still a lot of that are still recovering or are closing the doors. And we do have a number of citizens that are still not back to work on a full-time basis. And I just heard some tonight that are actually losing their jobs. This has to be a very serious consideration for all of us here tonight. Thirdly, I'd like to just talk quickly about reasons why I'm not supporting any of the rest is because of the external factors. Right now, we have been bailed out right now, our society in general, by both the federal and the provincial government. There's lots of programs right now, and everyone's running major deficits right now, and it's just adding to the debt problem. And to me, the piper's going to have to be paid at some time, and I don't even know what impact this is going to have on our other personal taxation. Fourthly, the proposed 7% tax increase right now, I just want to remind everyone that 7% is more than 7%, not only for those that have higher than the average assessment, that have got larger increases. But I just want to remind everyone, you've got to remember In fact, Jen did clarify this with me, that that 7% also includes the West Shore Parks and Rec and the Greater Victoria Public Library portion. But there's a number of other levies in your property tax bill, such as hospitals and schools, which are the biggest portion. It still represents 44% of property taxes that we haven't even, I know we don't control it directly, but it is going to have an impact. So there's a sticker shock effect, remember that. So not only is the median household going to suffer a 7% tax lift here, they're also going to have an uplift in these other levies, which have gone up every year. And now that our property assessments are 9% higher, there's going to be a sticker shock effect. And you can talk about percentages all you want, it's the dollar value in the end. And if you look at a typical home, on the other end of the scale, in the 800 plus to 1,000 type homes, there's going to be a very big sticker shock effect here. So I just want everyone to consider that. And the last thing, and just so that you know, I just want to remind everyone, our property assessments did go up by 9%. So, and finally, I just want to say one thing, and it's as a simple principle. And I live by this. I ran my businesses this way. As a small business owner, I ran my businesses as a large corporation. In this case, the way that we calculate taxes are simple ratios, and our denominator has to sort of match in ratio to our numerator. And the numerator being, it's the total operating budgets less revenue, which is the numerator in this case for our residential mill rates, and the total property value for our city in the denominator. And it's just a simple rule. I don't know how you run your households, but I can simply tell you right now that if the revenue isn't going up commensurately with your expenses, then we're going to have the problem that we have. Now I know we are growing, and we're going to go through growing pains, but I think we could do this in a more logical way. I don't think this big giant jump, it's just a sticker shock, especially during these times right now. So I'm just going to say this because I don't want to repeat myself on every one of the next items, because I felt the rest of the items were things that we can defer, delay. We don't have to do them. Anyways, that's all I had to say, Councillor Day, and I will not be supporting the rest. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. I know this is a really difficult thing for all of us, so I just am trying to keep us on track in terms of trying to be mindful of our time together, and also of where some of these recommendations have come from. So they aren't any particular councillor's pet programs. They are the result of a very time-consuming and carefully conducted service review, looking at where our strengths and weaknesses are in the city. And so I'm just going to ask that we really stick to each item that we are considering here. Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Baxter.
Okay, I've just got two things to say right now. The first one is, I believe Councillor Kobayashi spoke about the 7% tax increase and the 9% increase in value of properties as if they were additive. I apologize if I misunderstood that, but I just want to make it clear to everybody that the 9% general increase in value of properties has absolutely no effect on tax amounts paid. The tax amount is 7%. That's proposed 7% additional that is being proposed. And the actual dollar value of that, I believe, from the average house is $155 in a year. And I'm sure staff will stick a hand up and correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. And the second thing I wanted to say is I'm sorry that Councillor Kobayashi won't give us his wisdom on each one as to why we don't need each one. Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi, are you just wishing to respond? I'm just struggling with this because we're sort of getting into the weeds here. So if there's something to be added, please do so. But
it is a very important point, and I would ask Jen to clarify that, because it has to have an impact, because your other levies are not tied to your municipal tax rate. They're not attached to your mill rate. They are separate. They have their own separate mill rate, and it's multiplied by your property assessment value. So it is additive, in fact. So I would like Jen to clarify that for everyone, so everyone understands that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you, through the chair. One thing that's really important to keep in mind when we speak about the typical property or an average assessed property in Colwood. So this year, typical residential property in Colwood has realized a 9% increase in their assessment. That typical property, based on what's before you in this draft financial plan, they will realize an increase of approximately $155 should council pass a 7% municipal tax increase, and should council continue to reduce that commercial class multiplier. In addition, there are other levies levied on the city's property tax notice. We spoke about this briefly early on in budget deliberations when we were looking at the impact on a typical property, if that property was on sewer versus if that property was on septic, because there are differences. A sewer user fee on average, $300. Septic parcel tax, typically about $25. In addition, there are, of course, the levies that we levy on behalf of other jurisdictions beyond our control. The CRD, for example, based on what we know today, we're expecting an increase of about 2.8% for the CRD's levy and that impact on a typical property. Other jurisdictions, I don't have all the information right now. So there are a number of factors, but when it comes to that assessment increase, really it's just to keep in mind, okay, as a residential taxpayer in Colwood, if my assessment increased by 9%, I will realize the impact consistent with how we're describing the tax increase. If my assessment increased by more than the typical rate, if my assessment increased by 15%, I will realize a greater impact on the increase in taxes. Conversely, if my assessment didn't increase to the same tune, that 9%, then the tax impact will be lesser in my instance. So there are a number of factors to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm debating whether to get into the mathematics of what we're talking about or not. But I think on this one, it's pretty straightforward. The information technology person, we voted the other night to spend $350,000 on a new software program with the understanding that we needed a new person to implement it. Without this hire, the stuff sits in boxes gathering dust on the shelf, and that's probably not the wisest investment for the city. So I'm going to move that we hire this person. I don't have the motion in front of me anymore, but
sorry, I think you're speaking about the IT technician. which
Correct.
is, and we are on the recommendation of whether to hire an HR coordinator. Oh, no, that was going to number, sorry, my fault, that I got the reorganizing wrong. You are quite right, Councillor Parkinson.
Oh, say it again, please. Say it again. I don't hear that often enough.
Thank you. I think you've said what you intended to say, and I am looking for hands. I have Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I will support the motion as well. I would also like to note that when we say that it's a 0.32% tax increase, what that represents to an average household is $8 a year. So I would like to be really clear that that is the cost to the taxpayers or to a resident. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. And I will also be supporting this. And my reasoning is really very simple. As well as these having come from a very methodical process where we've looked at what we need in order to run the city efficiently and effectively, I think it's really important to remember what happens if we don't. I think that it's very critical in a time where there's more and more scams and lots of hacking going on, that we remain up to speed so that we can really ensure that the right hand does know what the left hand is doing and we're well coordinated in our response. Next, Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I just want to support the motion as well and say that Colwood's come a long way in IT in the last 15 years. And if we keep going as proposed in this motion and others that we've dealt with, we may reach the same level of ability in IT that the many other municipalities have already reached. And as many businesses have shown, using IT to save time and improve service is vital to any organization. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question on the recommendation that the committee fund the new IT technician in 2021. If anybody thinks I'm doing the wrong thing, please feel free to tell me. But do we need a mover, Amanda or Marcy?
I believe I moved that.
Yes,
Oh,
Councillor Parkinson moved it. We don't need a seconder.
Right, perfect, thank you. Just all of a sudden I thought, I'm calling the question, who moved it? Anyone opposed? Councillor Kobayashi is opposed, and that is carried. Moving on to the next recommendation, 4.0, that committee recommend whether or not to fund the increased bike lane maintenance in 2021. Oh, I think that Councillor Kobayashi, is your hand still up from before, or were you wishing to speak to this one? No, there we go. I have Councillor Baxter, followed by Councillor Logan.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask that staff describe what additional bike lane maintenance we will get for this.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Day. We've got the team standing by, but I believe we're going to be doubling up from once a month service to twice a month service, but stand to be corrected.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, anything further?
Well, I think the service we're talking about is bike lane sweeping, is that correct?
It's my understanding. Mr. Earl, is that what we're talking about?
That is correct.
You? Councillor Baxter?
I was just trying to work out what the mayor would say that costs per household per year. And I think it would be more.
It's $5.
$5.
I've done the math on all of them.
Well,
Thank you.
I've biked about 300 kilometers this month, and I must say it is much, much safer, as well as more pleasant to do it in a bike lane. And definitely if the bike lane is clean. For anybody who's wondering why bike lanes might be dirtier than car lanes, it's because cars actually sweep their own roads quite well a lot of the time. The action of the tires tends to send the dirt downhill towards the bike lane. I'm gonna move that we, I think it's possible to move that we only, no, we have to move the whole thing or nothing, I believe. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move that we include this in the budget. Thank you.
Sorry, point of order, Chair.
Yes.
So I don't believe that comment was correct. It's not an all or nothing. I think unless staff are saying that, I believe we can budget whatever we wish.
Thank you. I'm looking to staff.
Thank you. I think we have Rob Boyle, who's prepared to speak to this and just trying to figure out how.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so you can hear me. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was trying to work out the mechanics of this. I'm better at road maintenance, sorry, not computers. The bike lane and improved maintenance, yes, is correct. It is a simple formula to basically do a second pass and a more frequent pass in covering the bike lanes. Councillor Baxter, I believe, did say that most of the debris gets pushed over to the bike lanes, and that is correct. However, I would not want to slam the provider of the service and saying that they don't do that. They do try. So it is an increased service to allow for the bikes. Bikes are very sensitive to rocks on the road, more so than cars are.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Okay, so Councillor Baxter, now that we have new information, I would like to offer you another opportunity to do your motion differently.
Okay.
Now that we have new information.
Okay, I'm gonna say, well said, Mr. Boyle, and move half of the proposed increase as I think we can gradually increase this. It doesn't need to be done in the entire jump. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Councillor Logan and Councillor Parkinson, are you happy to speak to this motion, or did you wish to wait until after the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually a bit torn. I understand where Councillor Baxter is coming from. You know, my perspective is that if we truly support active transportation, then we need to put our money where our mouth is and maintain the infrastructure appropriately. Further, this was an area that has been identified by cyclists in the past as needing a little more attention. So while any increase is good, you know, I kind of like to see what the service impact is. Maybe instead of once a month, maybe it's every 3 weeks versus every 2 weeks. I'm not sure, but I'll hear what my esteemed colleague, Councillor Parkinson, has to say.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably landed in the right spot. It's a hard one to say. We could wait and do it another year. As Councillor Logan points out, active transportation is important to the goals of the city. I will throw in the other issue that one of the COVID issues that's surfacing itself in the biking community is it's getting harder and harder to find new tubes. So anything we could do to reduce that stress on our cyclists is maybe a good idea. So I have in my head wrestled back and forth with punt this to next year, fund it because biking is a good thing to do, and nice bike lanes are a nice thing to have clear. And so I'm going to suggest that my colleague, Mr. Baxter, nailed it, and I'm going to support the funding half of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say that I am also in the same boat, kind of. Any improvement is good, but I do agree with Councillor Logan that we have prioritized active transportation, and not only is it hard to find tubes, but it's really hard to grow new skin after you crash. So I've seen a lot of accidents. This is a direction that I guess I'll be happy either way, but I would really have preferred to see this improved as much as we possibly can. One of the facts that I learned at the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities that I attended was how very dangerous it is to not be using active transportation. That the health effects and the health impacts, especially on children going to school, are huge. So I would prefer to see more done. I see Councillor Baxter, your hand is up. Did you have something more to add?
No, that was just left over from my last session.
Perfect. So I've lowered all hands. I'm going to call the question. The motion that's on the table is to increase the bike lane, but only 50% of what is in front of us in the planned budget. All those opposed? Councillor Jansen and Councillor Kobayashi are opposed. It is carried. Okay, moving on. We are looking at whether or not to fund the increased parks maintenance in 2021. Councillor Jansen.
Yes.
Oh, your hand was up.
I thought you were going to ask me a question. Sorry, I assumed you put it down after the vote there.
Oh, sorry. I thought that I had, but I could have got it wrong. Did you wish to speak to the increased park maintenance?
If you're asking me, no.
Okay.
I'll wait. Read it
Logan?
and hear.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Day. I will actually move the recommendation and happy to speak to motivate, if you like.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this wholeheartedly. In fact, I think this is a bit of a deal that we're getting, and this is actually a good news story. We know that our parks are getting pressured left, right, and center because of the COVID pandemic. People are getting out. Again, a good news story, and that brings with it the need to maintain it more. Whether it is picking up garbage, replacing dog poop bags, or mowing the lawn, what have you. The other thing is that people have got higher expectations. And we've been hearing that over the last couple of years in terms of what they expect the maintenance levels to be. And I think we have really strained our parks crews over the last number of years. And I think we need to respond to the additional pressures that they are facing to provide an increased level of service. So my feeling is if we don't, we're stepping backwards as we continue to grow, and we can't afford this. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'd support Councillor Logan. I think this is one of those interesting issues where the city's been under a lot of pressure to make Royal Bay a first-class destination, words to that effect. And that has meant that there's been quite a lot of beautiful parks and landscape boulevards added to Royal Bay so far. And the issue of the need for increased staff time to maintain these additional beauties was raised some time ago, and we haven't really raised the staff in order to do that. And I think Councillor Logan's reference to straining our staff is accurate. We've even had the contractors building Royal Bay helping out with parks maintenance, maintenance on parks that were completed and handed over to the city, because they didn't want the place to look bad, because they had to sell product there, and that's helped. But they're not going to keep doing that. And even with that, there have been times when some of our boulevards have really not looked good. So I have to support this because nobody's ever approached us and said, you need to do less to maintain the parks and boulevards. But if we keep building them and we don't hire extra staff, we will be doing less to look after them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I did in fact have the opportunity on the weekend to spend some time at Meadow Park with my grandkids. And it really is a fabulous park. Still more to come down there. We've heard about the issues with the rabbits in there. I guess I very much support if you own it, you got to maintain it, and we own it. Luckily, we should be proud to own it, and we should be proud to maintain it and do a crackerjack job. The only question I have, and hopefully there's someone on staff who can assist with this, is I think when we were having our service review, we raised the possibility of using Canada, I think it's called Canada Student Grants or something like that, to hire students to supplement the parks department that we have already. I'm just wondering how that reflects on this proposal, and if there's room to hire and give some jobs to the young kids in the community for the summer to do some of the how would I call it, less intensive or less skilled jobs within the parks. So I don't know if anybody in staff can remember that conversation and where we ended up during the service review, but I wouldn't mind a refresher.
CAO Earl.
Thank you, Chair Day, and I'll have Ms. Hepting jump in if she can provide greater clarity. It would be administration's approach in every instance where we see a grant available to help us with an operational cost that we apply for it. I do not believe this current budget includes any specific revenue for student summer funding.
And just to add through the chair, the CAO is correct. There has been no student summer grant reflected in this draft budget.
Thank you.
May I continue?
Yes.
So I guess the question is, Why not? Would it be useful and appropriate? And would it help us provide the service we'd like to provide for our citizens at a lower cost?
Chair Day, may I respond?
Yes.
Administration would never hesitate to apply for funding for programs such as you're describing, Councillor Parkinson. Where we see opportunities, we apply for grants. Where we're successful, or where we have a reasonable degree of probability that we're going to be successful, we would include such in the budgets. At this juncture, we have no reasonable probability of receiving student summer grant funding for these particular positions.
Pity. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. I wasn't planning on speaking about summer grants, but I'm going to speak about summer grants just for a moment. I have extensive experience with summer grants, and usually the cutoff is the end of February. So we probably would not hit this summer season at all. However, I would like to reinforce what Councillor Parkinson said, because this is a drum I have been pounding for 10 years, and it never seems like we get into a position that we actually make an application. So I'm thrilled. I believe RCA Earl, and we will probably apply, and well, I expect that we will apply next year for the 2022 summer. Speaking to the motion, specifically, I will be supporting the motion, very supportive of us increasing the parks and trails budget. I want to be clear, this cost, the cost ramification for the average household is $13.25 per year for us to do this. I think this is a strong business decision to say yes to this, and I'm going to tell you why. We are the third lowest. Councillor Kobayashi provided earlier today to all of council some information from the taxation area, and in that it showed what the median residential assessed value of the property was. For Colwood, it was $685,000. The only two jurisdictions that are lower than us for a median property assessment is Souk and Langford. Part of how do we drive our prices up and how do we become more attractive? We do that by being an attractive place to live. I guarantee you, if we have parks that are second to none, people will aspire to live in Colwood and move here. And we will see a driver of economics around prices escalating and everything else. This is a smart business decision as well as a smart decision to maintain and take care of our community. Finally, we have constantly reinforced from a COVID standpoint how important it is for our residents to be getting outside and to be getting exercise. And for us not to be encouraging that and supporting that through our parks and trails system, it's not with me. So 100% supporting this motion this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I think everyone has spoken that wanted to speak. Therefore, I will call the question on increasing the funding for parks maintenance in 2021. And any opposed? Councillor Kobayashi is opposed. Thank you. Moving on to parks and trails and specifically invasive plant management. So just catching up with my button pushing here. We have a recommendation our service review has recommended an increased level of invasive plant management. Any questions? Councillor Parkinson.
Okay, I'm going to go all Doug Kobayashi here and move option A, that we not fund the increased parks and trail invasive plant management in 2021.
Okay, I have next I have Councillor Baxter.
I'm going to speak against this motion. I notice more and more invasive plants, particularly the the one whose name I've forgotten. But anyway, there's one plant looks like a rhododendron, and it grows through roads and many other green places. And it is in fact the juices of it are in fact toxic. If you get them in your eye, particularly, they're extremely toxic. But even on your hands, they can damage your hands, and it's recommended you only ever cull them with gloves. And I think it would be a good thing to get rid of these. I have to admit that we don't get a lot of pressure to get rid of them. But if you don't keep on them, they just increase more and more. And they're a problem in our park. So I'm going to be voting against the motion to not do this one.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too can't support my friend's motion. I wonder out loud, what is the cost if we don't continue on removing invasive species? It's like getting a rock chip in your window. Instead of spending the $75 to get it fixed, it's going to cost you $1,000 to replace that sucker because it's going to crack all the hell. So same thing. It's one of those things that we need to stay on top of, and otherwise the cost will be enormous in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I am also going to speak against this, and not for any reason except that it is really difficult to maintain our parks when there are noxious invasive species there. And they are dangerous. I have had some of my beavers in the past have gotten terrible burns on their hands from Daphne. There are parks and we need to take care of them. Councillor Parkinson, did you wish to speak again?
Sounds like I better. It's hard. I'm sorry that we talk about this being important and invasive plants and how nice it would be to stay on top of them. It's hard for me to picture $35,000 making a dent in the invasive plants in this community. I mean, I look out my window and I see blackberries and broom as far as the eye can see. So yeah, there's invasive plants this year. There's going to be invasive plants next year. I've supported most of the increases here. It seems to me that I'm not in favor of just willy-nilly increasing everything. So I'm going to stick with my motion. So I'll go down with my friend, Mr. Councillor Kobayashi, on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, did you wish to speak again?
I think the point is that we don't want everybody's view to be the same as Councillor Parkinson's. I don't mind the blackberries, but not the broom.
Thank you. So the motion that's on the floor is to not fund the additional invasive plant management in 2021. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Those opposed, yeah, Councillor Logan, Councillor Mayor Martin, Councillor Baxter, and myself are opposed. So that is defeated. Question to staff. Do you need a motion in the affirmative?
Councillor Day, that would be helpful.
Thank you. So I will move that we fund the additional invasive plant management. Oh, that's fine. I was just trying to imagine how to word it. Anyone opposed? Councillor Kobayashi and Councillor Parkinson are opposed. Oh, and Councillor Johnson. Thank you. So that is carried, and we are on to recommendation number 7, whether or not to fund increased parks and trails urban forestry maintenance in 2021. Okay, I think I left those hands up from last time. Sorry, if you wanted to speak, can you put your hand up again, please? Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Could someone talk us through what this is exactly, how it differentiates from the last parks person?
Rob or Gord, could you provide some commentary?
Hello, this is Gord Bavillier through the chair to Councillor Jansen. This is for contracted services for the big trees. So we're seeing quite a large uptick in maintenance through our trails in our forested areas, where we're seeing trees because of climate and everything else. Trees are struggling right now, so we're seeing a lot of work needed to be done, and this is a contracted services to have trees either maintained, removed, habitated, and that's what this extra money is for.
We have also had some areas in our parks where trees have actually fallen on people. Mayor Martin, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. So I have a question as well. So in the descriptor, it basically says, let me just get to the end of the line where it just says for trail-specific contracted tree services to provide improved maintenance of the forest canopy for safety. Can I please, if this motion doesn't pass, what is the liability to the city? Perhaps Mr. Earl could comment on that. And I would like to also understand what are the, if we don't pass this, what is the consequences to the issue that's just been discussed by our parks manager?
Chair Day, may I respond?
Yes, absolutely.
The city will always take care from a liability perspective to protect the public. I believe what this proposal is here in front of you this evening for is to take proactive steps such that we can preserve the health of our urban forest and specifically large trees, such that we're not having to remove them for safety purposes, such that we can maintain them and they can provide years of service into the future. But I'll have Gord, if you could provide any further specifics.
Exactly, that's just what you said. It will be very proactive, as well as there are, as well as assessments will also need to be contracted out as well. So having those assessments done and coming up with management plans, and then the proactive care and maintenance on these trees is part of this as well.
Can I just ask you, Gord, does it make a difference to our insurer as well that we have a regular program in place?
That's information. I don't have that information. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, may I just do a follow-up question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So could staff please comment on if this was postponed a year, would there be a significant consequence if we readjust this one next year versus this year? And I guess the question would be, is there a concern that if we don't maintain specific trees this year, that we will lose them next year?
That
Chair Day,
very
may I
well could
respond?
be. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Gord.
That very well could be. We are seeing quite a large uptick in tree decline, laminate root rot, and many other diseases, along with the climate, has proven that trees are struggling. And on top of that, when we have development, now we are disturbing and exposing trees to weather and such that they haven't been exposed to before. So very well, if we are unable to maintain some trees, we could very well lose them.
Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baxter. You must be on mute.
Sorry, I had to mute because I was sneezing earlier. I have to agree with what Mr. Beauvillier was saying. I was recently on a walk with a registered biologist who was pointing out to me all the challenges that our trees are facing. And I think that this is going to add $2 to the taxes, something like that. Mayor Martin's going to correct me.
$1.50.
$1.50. Okay, so for $1.50, I'm for this. Absolutely.
Are you putting that as a motion?
I am. Yes. Thank you for prompting me.
Excellent. We have a motion to support the urban forestry. All those opposed? Councillor Kobayashi is opposed. It is carried. Thank you. Our next item is the recommendation on whether or not to fund increased trail maintenance in 2021. I'm suspecting that this is going to be somewhere in the same neighborhood where we've already been, especially given that we know there's so many more people on our trails and in our parks because of COVID that it's probably going in the same direction. I have Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to hear from staff on why this is absolutely necessary.
Thank you.
Bob or Gord, could you provide some commentary?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Baxter. So what this will do is be able to increase our frequency and our maintenance on the trails. Right now, we are unable to get to the trails as much as is needed, as well as we're seeing, as we've done with the big stair replacement, we're seeing infrastructure in the trails that we need to start being more proactive with our trails, keeping them keeping drainage, keeping the trails safe, and just regular maintenance. The frequency is going to be key for us to be able to do that, as well as everything else that's included. We're being asked for more garbage cans, more poop can, or more dog poop dispensers, that sort of thing. So the more that we add, we're losing ground, and this is going to help us maintain that.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Okay, I move we include this in the budget.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter. Anyone else wishing to speak to it? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I'll be brief, but you have me at garbage cans. Gord, thank you.
Excellent. So I will call the question. All those opposed? Councillor Kobayashi is opposed. Thank you. We are moving on to our next recommendation. is whether or not to fund increased boulevard beautification services. Councillor Baxter.
The basic argument for most of what we've just included in the budget has been if we own it, we should maintain it for safety reasons and other reasons. And I note that this one says improvements. And much as I would love to see improvements in our boulevards, this is not about maintaining, but rather creating improvements, which will then lead to increased maintenance. So I think, at least for this year, I'm going to go for leaving this one out. So I vote to not include this in the budget. I move that we not include it in the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a big supporter of beautification of boulevards, as my friends will know. And the condition of our boulevards sends a very clear message to those that actually want to invest in our community as to how much pride local government takes in maintaining their boulevards and enhancing the streetscape. I was told that years ago by a series of commercial developers who were looking at us or looking at community next door, and they used our boulevards against us because at that time we did nothing. And I think this is a small investment that could provide fruit, both from an investment point of view, but also in a pride point of view. I mean, there's nothing, if you want to live in a slum, that's fine. And, you know, that's how people will view your community. If you want to invest in the appearance of your community, that will pay dividends. I think it's a small investment. And, you know, well, I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Logan. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a difference here for me. Our constituents use the trails, playgrounds, what have you, but people aren't frolicking in the boulevards. You know, I'm fine if it was just a nice patch of grass. So in given our current state of affairs and times of austerity, I'm going to vote against this one for those reasons. It's unfortunate because I know Gord is passionate about these things, and I too would like to see some improvements, but perhaps now isn't the time.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Parkinson.
Very much support the intent of Councillor Logan. I think that having nice boulevards is very important, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna go all Councillor Jansen and say not at this time. We're gonna, you know, good thing to do. Wish we could do it, but you know, let's tighten our belts even if it's only half a notch. So I'll support the motion.
Okay, I guess that brings it to me. I'm the only one who hasn't chimed in on this one. And I have to say that it is a very difficult year. Everybody's going through a lot. But I do agree that having something that looks beautiful and is cheerful and complete, much like our complete streets idea, I do think that boulevards and beautification matter to a community. But I'm also aware that we're under a lot of pressures right now. I would be way more in favor of this if we had kind of a bigger long-term plan that was developed, so that I wouldn't feel like we were blowing the budget on annuals and, you know, it was just gonna look the same again a year from now. So for me, I won't be supporting this one at this time, but I would like to remind everybody that the way your city looks, it changes people's minds every day. Even if it's just to put a smile on their face because there's bees and birds and beautiful blooms around you. So I do agree that it's an important aspect of the city, but I think that we need a better plan than just make it look beautiful. I've lost my place here. Administration, can you help me? We have a motion already on the floor. I believe we do.
Yes, Councillor Baxter moved not to fund the increase to boulevard beautification services.
Excellent. And I believe everyone has spoken. So I am going to call the question. All those opposed, please raise your hands. Thank you. Councillor Logan and Mayor Martin are opposed. So the motion, which is kind of weird because it's a negative motion. So Mayor Martin and Councillor Logan voted against not beautifying the boulevards, and the motion has carried, and we are not beautifying the boulevards. Our next one is the urban forestry. This is a small amount to allow for an increased level of tree planting on boulevards. Councillor Baxter.
So these are trees on boulevards, and you might expect, given the previous motion, that I would be against this. But I'm actually going to speak for this and propose that we include it in the budget, move that we include it in the budget. And that is because I'm aware of an extensive survey that was carried out in all kinds of cities and towns on this continent. And they simply showed people pictures of streets, various streets, and asked them which was their favorite. And wherever you go, the favorite street of the vast majority of people is one that has trees in the boulevards. Not so much flowers or bushes, not that kind of beauty, but trees. People love trees. And so I'm going to support this one. It's probably another $1.50 or maybe $2.
75 cents.
75. It's 75 cents for trees. Seriously, who's not going to give 75 cents for trees? I move we include it.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Parkinson.
Well, after that impassioned thing from Councillor Baxter, what kind of cold, hard-hearted person could not support that motion? Well, here he is. To me, it's exactly the same as the last one, the beautification, the trees, both very nice things to do. Probably should have been lumped together in one overall budget. And to me, they're too similar to change my vote. So I'm afraid I'm not going to support funding these trees, even at 75 cents.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. So I'll give you my Coles Note versions on it. I think this is completely different, and I'm really glad that they are not put together, just because trees take a long time to establish, and they provide benefits that last for a very long time. Not always, we don't always get it right, but generally speaking, they provide shade. They reduce the overall temperatures, and with global warming soon to be making its presence ever more known, I think this is a really smart idea. And I think that Councillor Baxter was quite correct when he spoke about the study of how people feel about a location, that trees tend to get a very positive response. And this is not something that will be done this year and then gone away in the future. I mean, I'm sure it will also require maintenance and nurturing, but it has the potential to make a big impact for future generations. Councillor Baxter, did you wish to speak again?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other hands, then I will call the question to support trees on boulevards. All those opposed, please raise your hands. Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Kobayashi are opposed. Thank you, that carries. And our next item is the storm sewer maintenance. It is up on the screen before you. This is for the maintenance of the closed storm sewer system maintenance in 2021. And Councillor Parkinson.
I think this falls completely under the heading of, if you own it, you got to maintain it. It sounds to me like it's just taking a professional approach to maintenance of our storm sewers. So I'm prepared to move the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with my friend, and I just have to remember one name, Afferston Place, from 21 years ago. A closed pipe that collapsed, that no one knew was there, or it wasn't maintained. And so there's a lot of these things that are creeping around Triangle Mountain. So I think if we can get ahead of it, and it's just plain old maintenance, and we should not cheap out on maintenance. So I'll support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just checking. And Councillor Baxter.
That's why we have to keep Councillor Logan around. He's been on council for so long, he remembers stuff that probably nobody else remembers. I've only heard about Afferston Place by reputation, but I wasn't around then. But I would like to ask staff, if this money is going to get us to a 4-year maintenance rotation for camera and remediation, what are we at now?
Through the chair, this is Brent Molnar speaking for Councillor Baxter. We have not been doing an annualized rotation. We've been doing problem areas as they come up. So it's a latent review and inspection of it. This puts us onto a regular cycle, and we should expect to see maintenance budget coming forth from our inspections on an annual basis. I'm looking forward to this project because it does bring about some regularity to our program and intent. I'm available to answer more questions and hope that answers you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. I think you'd have to go a long way to find another municipality this big that doesn't have regular camera and remediate. So I've got to support this.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any other hands coming up, I will call the question. All those opposed to the storm sewer maintenance? Councillor Kobayashi is opposed. And it carries. Thank you. We have one last recommendation, and that is the one that we put to the end of the pile, which is that the committee recommend whether or not to fund the mid-year hire of an human resources coordinator in 2021. Or carry that to 2022. So maybe I'll start the ball rolling by just asking, I think probably the best person to speak on this would be CAO Earl with regard to what would the impact of pushing this off to 2022 be?
Thank you, Chair Day. I believe Ms. Perkins is on the call tonight, so can speak with some of the more specific answers. But broadly speaking, over the past 2 years, and 2021 is no exclusion, the municipality has seen a substantive increase in the turnover of our existing staff, notwithstanding the addition of any new staff and the recruitment challenges that brings. But we are seeing a very active labor market and substantially more turnover than we traditionally have. The result of that is both our current HR professional and all those managers and directors who are responsible for our hiring process have to spend more of their time doing some of the services required when we onboard and hire a new individual. And so we would see kind of decreased efficiency in all of the areas that are doing hiring, and we would see less time spent on strategic HR initiatives rather than kind of bringing someone on board to kind of handle the more administrative side of the equation. But again, I believe Ms. Perkins is on the call and can answer some specifics.
Okay, thank you. I'll give an opportunity for Ms. Perkins.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, further to CAO Earl's comments, it certainly recruitment is one very tangible and measurable way to highlight the efforts of HR to support managers in recruiting qualified and talented staff. And it is that that as well as other day-to-day employee relations, labor relations matters that require attention, that support could be really valued at that administrative level to also build capacity to focus on some of the more strategic initiatives. And that's, to help the city position itself as the employer it wants to be and have its workforce built to be the workforce it wants to have in terms of, qualified, high performing. So supporting the development of current staff to really help advance the city towards its goals. Yeah, I'll just leave it there for now. I see others have questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Earl. I believe we actually deferred this from last year, did we not?
Sorry, through to Councillor Logan. It was budgeted last year in 2022 because we couldn't bring it forward right away. So we were desirous to do it last year. Last year, we made the decision to push it to 2022. We're discovering this year that pushing it that far is actually having a material impact right now.
Yes, thank you. I thought we had it planned for last year, and frankly, HR is one of the most important departments within any organization, and I rely on HR incredibly in my role. And there are consequences if we don't support HR and we don't support the management team or the frontline employees that rely on the advice that HR gives. Colwood is quite late to the game in terms of creating an HR department with one single person in it, and frankly, it's just not appropriate given the amount of work and demands that department needs to serve the organization well. So it's not something that we can turn a blind eye on, and we've kicked it down the road already, and I don't think we can kick it down the road much longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Martin.
I appreciate what Councillor Logan has just said, and I'm not disagreeing with the things that he said, but I am going to make a recommendation that the motion that I'm going to recommend is that that staff amend the draft 2021 to 2025 financial plan to reflect a mid-year hire in 2022 as previously approved.
Okay, thank you. Any further motivation that you wish to make, Mayor Martin?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am just going to chime in on this. I do think that this is very important. Probably the biggest spend in, well, I know that the biggest spend in any municipality is the salaries of the employees who work there. And to optimize that, I think is critical to the organization. And I do think Colwood has been late to the game. So I do think that we have a tremendous number of new faces working for the city. Not necessarily new positions, but there's been lots of mobility in the employment sector throughout Greater Victoria. And I do think that putting this off, it would be very advantageous to get started sooner rather than later. So that is my thoughts on it. Whether you're talking about hiring someone new or getting the most out of the people that you do have, I think that would be a worthy initiative. Councillor Parkinson.
I see the financial incentive to delay this for a year, but it just doesn't strike me as practical. You know, I think again we're hiring a lot of people this year. We've heard from our HR manager that there's a whole bunch of issues at present. Frankly, I think we need to move now. Yeah, it's money, but when I talk about the storm sewers as being, if we own it, we have to maintain it. If we have staff, we have to stay on top of their issues and treat them well. So I'm not going to support this motion, tempting as it is.
So seeing no further hands, I'm going to call the question. All those opposed to the recommendation, the motion that this be put off to 2022. We have Councillor Baxter, Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Logan, and myself opposed. So that does not carry. So I guess I will fall on the sword to make this work better. I will recommend that the committee of the whole recommend that staff amend the financial plan to reflect a mid-year hire in 2021. Perfect. Okay, I will call the question. It's up on the board. All those opposed? We have Councillor Kobayashi and Councillor Jansen opposed. Thank you. That is carried. All right. I believe that brings us to the end of the recommendations under 5.1. Is there anything else, Jen, that you need?
Thank you, Chair Day. At this time, that does address all of the recommendations coming out of the proposed service increases. And so our next steps as scheduled are to return with the draft financial plan bylaw, which we intend to bring forth April 12th to council. We expect to receive our revised, in other words, the role that we levy on this week. So once we have that information, we will be able to bring forth that draft financial plan bylaw.
Thank you very much. So our next committee of the whole is scheduled for Monday, April 19th. As you just heard, the draft financial plan and budget will be coming to the April 12th council meeting. So I'm looking for, oh, and I think we've already got a hand up. Councillor Parkinson, did I miss you earlier?
Yeah, I wanted to just request some clarification from Jen. So these numbers will all be added up, and you know, they may not be 7%, but they're probably over 6.5%. I would like to understand the decision last year to, over 5 years, bring the business tax multiplier to the CRD average. And I'd like to know the differences between carrying on with that plan, and I think we were going 20% per year closer, versus stalling for 1 year, and what that would mean, and both to the residences and the businesses. My simplistic math would say if this was a 6.5% increase on residences, if we kept moving to a lower business tax, that would bump that up to a number of 7.5 or 8. If we stalled the revision to the business taxes, they would then go up by the 6.5%, the same as residences. But I'm not sure I have that math correct, and I'd like to defer to somebody way smarter than me. So Jen, can you explain that? Or if it's complicated, we could wait till the next time, but I'd like to understand it.
Certainly, through the chair, thank you very much for that question. Staff can absolutely return with scenarios. You may recall last year when we brought forth the draft financial plan bylaw, we do draft a covering report memo that highlights some of the discussions through budget deliberations, highlights tax increases in years 1 through 5. And we can also certainly highlight the impact. So right now, spring 2020, council provided staff with direction that we reduce that business multiplier exactly as Councillor Parkinson just described. And so we can bring forth what the impact would be if we don't make any change to that multiplier. And to answer your question, all things remaining equal with the proportionate disbursement of the assessment base between classes, yes, the business class would realize a tax increase similar to how our residential class will realize a tax increase. I can speak to that with certainty when I see the revised roll later this week. But hearing that, I'm happy to bring forth and highlight those two scenarios for council, and then staff would need to receive direction on that. Immediately following draft financial plan, we will be drafting the tax rate bylaw, and we'll need that direction for then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and I also saw Councillor Baxter. You're on mute.
Thank you. Another factor in exactly what the tax increase is the issue of putting money aside for future replacement of capital assets. And I believe that we gave that a miss last year. And we haven't formally made a decision as to whether we want to give it a miss or not this year. I'm just wondering if anybody in council, aside from me, wants to think about that. I guess not.
Oh, I see Councillor Parkinson has his hand up.
Now, what would my life be without thinking about things like that constantly? Really. Frankly, I think if we don't put money away in our sustainable infrastructure fund while things are going great, it's going to be a lot harder when the growth slows down. So while we have a big chunk of new construction revenue, I think placing it into sustainable infrastructure replacement is a wise thing to do. And I would also point out in the financial plan as laid out today, even with the funds going into the sustainable infrastructure fund, that fund reduces over the next 4 or 5 years in the financial plan. So I don't think we should be cutting back on that at this point.
Okay, and Councillor Baxter?
Well, I would counter that by saying that the rate of development is going great, as Councillor Parkinson put it, but the return from that is meager so far. There will be far more return from that next year or the year after as these developments get completed, such as the developments in the Allendale lands, which will bring in commercial and light industrial taxation, which is much higher than residential. So I think there's a reason, an argument for saying in 2021, with all of the difficulties that have been described by others and all of the increases that we have to include, because if we own it, we have to maintain it for safety as well as other reasons. Our reason to not put anything away for future replacement now, but to put more away when, for instance, the Allendale properties are producing taxation and there's a significant increase in the taxation we're receiving. So I'm going to test that by putting forward a motion that we not put anything away in the sustainable remediation fund for 2021.
Okay, I'm just going to, I think that motion is, I know it's germane to the budget discussion, but it certainly wasn't contemplated on our agenda. So perhaps we could just find out from staff when we should be having this discussion.
If I may, I'm trying to avoid a situation where we make too many changes after the next meeting. And I'm trying to make that decision now so that staff doesn't have to change a lot of stuff after the next meeting, because I would understood that would be a difficulty.
Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Baxter. And certainly this is just an appropriate time as any to have this discussion, and staff absolutely do appreciate having any proposed changes. We need to receive that information sooner rather than later. With respect to the additional 1%, we just went through a series of recommendations and spoke about the tax impact on the average residential property. And so with the 1%, the tax impact on the average residential property would be approximately $22 this year. It's also important to keep in mind the compounding effect. Our sustainable infrastructure replacement policy, this is one of the tactics. It's that every year until we reach sustainable levels, we levy an additional 1%. If we do not levy that additional 1% this year, that sets us back just on an analysis just of this year. It would be to the tune of almost $1 million within a 5-year period of having not levied that additional 1% this year. That would be the impact on the reserve balance 5 years out. When we miss the additional 1% this year, that means next year we don't have that factored into the base of what we're transferring into the reserve. So I add that information for context on committee's consideration. But if committee right now, based on what staff have heard, we would be bringing forth a draft financial plan bylaw that would include the additional 1% for sustainable infrastructure reserves. And so if committee wishes to recommend otherwise, we'd be happy to receive that recommendation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to remind everybody, like I think I remember standing on the stage with most of you receiving an award for our 50-year capital plan, and yet we really haven't started it yet. So in my mind, it's a bit disingenuous to accept the award and then really not enact it. So I have a bit of a problem with that. That's on the follow-through side. And yes, you know, we have to pay the piper for future generations. And Councillor Parkinson has educated me on all things sewers. And I think that maybe as much as I would like to trim another % off the budget, that this is not an area we should do so.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. I'm actually going to say I want to spend this. And because thank you very much, Councillor Jensen. You took the words out of my mouth, because it is very disingenuous in what we're doing right now. And I understand exactly what you're saying, Ms. Hepting. And so I totally agree with you. And just the reason I put up my hand in the first place, I thought it was a point of order, because here we go again. We brought up a subject that is not on the agenda, and no time to prepare, and we're thinking off our feet, and we're trying to make deals and discussions, and we're not prepared. So I'm very disappointed in this. So that's all I got to say. Thank you. And I won't be supporting Councillor Baxter's motion.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember that we're all of good intent here. We are all trying to make sure that we don't miss anything, that all the right information is available to staff. And that's certainly what I heard come through in what Councillor Baxter has proposed. I also agree that it's hard to take the medicine of having to follow through on the plan to set aside money for the future for Colwood, so that nobody is in the position that we have been in for some time now, a very long time, of knowing that, you know, we have some pretty steep hills to climb and not many resources to help us get to the top. So this is a great plan that we made. And, you know, that was my worry last year when COVID first locked us down, when we made our choice to not put that money aside. That was a very difficult choice. And it's again, this year, it's not gotten any easier to make the choice to put the money in the budget that we really need. And I just remind you all that we're here based on our official community plan, done with loads of consultation, where these are the services that our community said they wanted. So we're doing our best to serve that in as reasonable a way as we can. Every one of us, whether we're for it or against it, we're all in this together, trying to do what's right for our community. So I think it's great that we had this discussion, even though it stretched me as well to have the discussion without it being on the agenda. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Councillor Logan has moved that motion. And any opposed to adjourning? I see none, so we are adjourned. Thank you all for your very hard work.
Thanks all.